Okay, now it's time.
In progress.
Okay, it's time now. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Dr. Montri Tapichaikun. I'm delighted to welcome you here to our Zoom meeting hosted by the faculties of Humanities, Kasetsart University, for an evening of conversation for a trendy issues, that is how research work in humanities can be collaborated, especially right now where online communication facilitates international cooperation, like what we're doing now. We are meeting on Zoom. I'm talking about research networking, which is our topic today, opportunities for research and networking in humanities. As a teacher and a researcher myself, working in our faculties, where we have so many, departments, languages, literatures, music, mass, media, tourism, these topics is then interesting to me, and then I hope for all of us, our academic staff at the faculty. This evening, we are joined by 3 guest speakers from Malaysia and United States. And in a few minutes, we're going to listen to the talk. But before that, I would like to invite our Dean Associate Professor Dr. Kitima Indrambharya to give us an opening speech and to welcome our guests and everyone.
Okay, distinguished speakers and guests, I'm greatly pleased to give you an opening speech on this international webinar on the topic, the opportunities in the humanities. The Faculty of Humanities, Kasetsart University, has a policy in supporting its personnel to engage in research works on international level with different reputable institutions and universities from around the world, which is in line with the policy of reinventing university devised by the Ministry of Higher Education, Science, Research, and Innovation of the Kingdom of Thailand. It is then an opportune moment that the Research and Innovation Division of the Faculty of Humanities, Kasetsart University, organized the international webinar, the episode 1 today, on the topic, Opportunities for Research and Networking in the Humanities, purpose in igniting research ideas among the personnel of the Faculty of Humanities or other institutes. These ideas, I have high hope that could be an important stepping stones to greater cooperation and networking with their foreign counterparts. And today, the Faculty of Humanities is honored by 3 renowned speakers from 2 institutions. First is Professor Dr. Kok On, who is the director of Confucius Institute at the University Malaysia Sabah, Malaysia. Also from the University Malaysia Sabah is Associate Professor Ramzah Dambul, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for the Research and Innovation. Lastly, but definitely not least, we have Dr. Paul Michael Taylor, the Director of Asian Cultural History Program, Asian, European, and Middle Eastern Ethnology, and at the Venerable Smithsonian Institution and the Washington, D.C., the United States of America. I firmly believe that the experiences, insights, and guidance from these 3 speakers today shall springboard the research curiosity and plans that our participating researchers today have in a greater and stronger and more fruitful research network in the future. I would like to express my appreciation for the moderator, the faculty personnel, the academics from different institutions, along with those interested in the research events. Lastly, may today's event go on successfully with all its objectives met. And in this light, allow me to set the wheels of research networking in motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kitima. Okay, next I'm going to give the stage to our moderator this evening, who is also an associate dean for research, assistant dean for research and innovation, assistant professor Dr. Theptawee Chokvasin, for the next 2 hours of moderated conversation. And we should end at around 8 p.m. Thailand time. So everyone, please join me in giving them a warm welcome this evening. Our speakers, Dr. Ramzah, Dr. Kok On, Dr. Paul, and our moderator tonight, this evening, Dr. Theptawee.
Thank you so much, Professor. Okay, my name is Theptawee Chokvasin, who will be the moderator of this session. And for me, it is rather, for me, I am so glad to be the moderator of this session because I act now as an assistant dean of the research and innovation. And I know that the university and all of the academics and researchers in Thailand are now like to find out for the successful achievements, which are to have something which is called continuing research collaborations among Thai and overseas academics and researchers. And it would be good for us to facilitate coordinated approach among academics and international researchers. It is again for us to share the valuable knowledge and identify opportunities for collaborations. Okay, so I am with the unhesitant and glad accepted for me to be the moderator of this lecture. According to the session, the schedule of the session of international talk, from the start, we would like to have the lecture from Associate Professor Dr. Ramzah Dambul. Dr. Ramzah Dambul is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for the Research and Innovation from University Malaysia Sabah.
Excuse me, moderator, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm supposed to give the introduction. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so we would like to welcome Professor Dr. Kok On, who is the director of Confucius Institute at UMS Universiti Malaysia Sabah. Sorry about that, Professor. So please.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator. My special thanks, of course, to the organizer who worked very hard for this seminar. Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Kasetsart University, Deputy Dean, Research and Innovation, all the academicians and distinguished guests. I think I would like the organizer to share my slides over there so that easier for me to control. So who is the one helping me?
Will help you, sir. I will share your slide. This one.
Same to Dr. Ramzah.
Yes.
Okay. So please go to, I'm low, I mean attached to University Malaysia Sabah. So go to next slide, please. Yes, today I'm just take this opportunity to give a brief introduction, because for every academician to start a research project, getting a research grant is related to today's topic. we talk about the chances. If for those senior academicians who have awarded many grants, I think they know better than me. So I would like to share a bit of my personal experience to especially to the young academician. Like when I started teaching in university, I was trapped in the process of applying for a grant. So for example, the chance especially, what more we in the field of humanities, we are not the special courses, we call that the quantitative researcher. We humanities, most of us, I do mean all, are in qualitative research. So getting a research grant, we face a lot of challenges. So my deputy dean, Dr. Ramzah, will speak specific. So I just give a general introduction to begin with. Next, please. Next slide. Yes, now I would like to highlight in the context of Malaysia, specifically UMS, because I have been working in UMS as situated in Sabah, formerly known as North Borneo. So number one, the academician in this university, first, of course, we helped by the government of Malaysia, especially the Ministry of Higher Education. So in here we have many. I just name two common grants that we apply. Number one, known as Fundamental Research Grant Scheme. That one for the fundamental research. We have long-term research grant scheme where involved in inter-university all over Malaysia, and this take a long-term, meaning about 3 to 5 years research, and many more which I'm sure Dr. Ramzah will share with us. Next is a private firm. This is a challenge. So we talk about the opportunity. Government grant, the main thing rely on the proposal and how an academician work it out to get the grant. But the important thing I would like to stress here is for the government grant, of course, it aims to help the academician, especially like for me in the humanities field. I thank UMS. When I started joining UMS, they have a small grant for a new lecturer to begin with, says 5,000 ringgit, but to begin with, I was very happy to get the grant. Then I know the meaning, oh, this is a chance given to me. I started with like that. Next, I would like to mention a bit about the private firm. Private firm, the challenges, of course, are very great. Not many people. I applied for grants, my experience, I have to be frank to my academic friends here. I fail many times. I learn, I try again. And this is something I would like to share with the young lecturer. Finally, you achieve. So what will make you get the grant and so on? Different scholars has different experience, I'm sure. Because in front of me, they are very senior people who have come across all these challenges and what opportunity we have. Next slide, please. Okay, we talk about the humanities, especially I cannot list out all the humanities. languages, literature. There are so many types of literature and different fields, philosophy, religion, art, and so on. Just now, at the beginning, I have mentioned for humanities field to get a private firm grant. I don't know what I should put, can be inverted comma a bit difficult, because for private firm, what is your research can contribute to my company, my business, my organization. So if those researchers can contribute in that special part, of course, they don't mind to give you a grant, meaning to say they spend money, in return they achieve something. But for many humanities, I can say like mine is a folk literature. It's more to preservation, knowledge based. You ask me to do a business, I'm a fair person. So to apply for private grant, you have to think and be creative. Okay, number one, what I would like to share with the young researcher, to apply a grant, also a person must be creative. I put it as simple as your title of the research. Let's say you apply for your government grant. The title itself is not important. And in a country like Malaysia, there are so many people apply for it all over the country. So the title itself may lead to the panel whether they want to read your proposal or not. So to form an important title, to tell the panel, once they see the title, oh, this is very important, you catchy, that's number one. So what I'm trying to say is we have to be creative. Another thing, a researcher like me, I have to keep on thinking to get how I want to get a grant where I cannot contribute in the company's income, I cannot contribute in the progress of the industry, so on and so forth. That is the main problem. So sometimes I think, for another example, there are so many ways. What I mean, can I collect the folk tales of Sabah, for example? It's in Kadazan Dusun language. And I translate into Chinese, so I go to a Chinese publisher there, ask for a grant. Say I want to write a local folklore story to publish in Chinese. So that may stand a chance. I mean, I just quote an example. Another example is if I mean better, I talk about my personal experience. The Chinese beliefs. So where can I get a grant for a private company? That's not possible. The only chance I can have is, of course, I approach like the Chinese temple committees. Maybe I will suggest to them, I do this research for you. What about you give me a grant and to my university under my name? That is another reason. Next is the networking. It's the topic of today's research. Networking is important. If you work alone, you cannot get, you must work with a few people among your colleagues. Better still, inter-university. Every country has so many universities. The networking is very important. And of course, the best, you can know academician, other countries' academician, where you can stand a chance. So you work in a team also can contribute. Some people, the last thing I would like to mention here, everyone write a proposal, you share out, so you apply as many as possible, then your chance of getting a grant, whether government or private, will be higher. So everyone has to think, what I mean, be creative. Okay, next. I have to thank everybody. This is a brief introduction. I leave the session to my Deputy Vice Chancellor. Thank you very much for just sharing 2 cent experience. Bye.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Kok On. And maybe before I would give the brief summary for your lecture. According to your talk, maybe I would have to invite Associate Professor Ramzah to talk to us about the next lecture for it to be continuous to your talk. So please welcome. Please welcome Associate Professor Dr. Ramzah Dambul.
Thank you, moderator. I think before I start, I would like to make a little bit of disclaimer. The weather in where I am at the moment is not so good. It is raining. So I just hope that my internet will be stable throughout. Yeah, but just in case there is some technical glitch, and then you would understand that the reason is because of the weather that I'm having here now. It is raining quite heavily. But anyway, good day, everybody. Since we have participants from different parts of the world, I'm not really sure how to greet probably some of whether it is good morning, afternoon, or evening. But wherever we are, I hope that everyone is okay and safe. The Honorable Associate Professor Dr. Kitima, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Kasetsart University, Associate Professor Dr. Theptawee, who is also the moderator for today, the Deputy Dean for Research and Innovation of the Faculty of Humanities, Kasetsart University, my fellow speaker, Dr. Paul Michael, also my colleague, Professor Loh, the Director of Confucius Institute, University Malaysia Sabah, all the academicians and also the respected guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to the organizer for this invitation. Can I have my slide, please? Who is looking after for my... Professor Loh. Okay. My slide is coming. Not this one. I have another slide of my own.
Prof. Kowit, I sent to you 2 sets of slides, correct?
Oh, I will check, sir. I will check. That's my slide. Let you talk first, sir. I will share slide later.
Because my side, I don't have a share what the button here. Or
Okay.
share screen. I try and see.
Okay, just a minute, sir.
Anyway, well, our technical team from that side is trying to searching for the file. I would just like to, what my sharing today is not so much what Prof. Loh shared just now, is more on how do we, it is kind of tips on how we apply for research grant. And probably mine is in a bigger picture. I just want to share probably some experience for UMS in doing research, and also I would like also to share some potential collaboration that we can, pursue together. Or is it possible for me to share from my side? Can I share the slide from here? Is it okay?
Sorry, I may say, if you see a share screen.
You can share the slide from the side, sir. It's okay.
Dr. Ramzah, you try and see, you click the share there, the share screen.
The share screen,
Down there, at the bottom.
Oh, here.
Just click correct. We can see now. Good.
Not this one. Hold on.
No, you put your slide now. This is the screen.
Not this one. Hold on. What is this?
No, this is a screen. You click your PowerPoint. Then the PowerPoint will cover this, I think. You find your PowerPoint now.
Where is the? No, this is not the way. Where is that?
If you have two screens, you can go out, hit share screen again, and now share the other screen instead.
Can I share on behalf of Prof. TNC?
How do I stop?
Prof, let me share for you.
How do I stop? Okay. How do I stop? I don't. Wow.
Just minimize it, Dr. Ramzah. Let the organizer share with us. Now they have it already.
You can look for the stop sharing.
I cannot find the share button.
The stop sharing. Is it down there? Got stop sharing?
No, I can't really see.
So organizer, have you found the slides now?
The host can have you not able to share, then someone else can share.
Prof. Flo, can I share on behalf of TNC?
Yes, please. Dr. Ramzah, he will share now. Okay, Dr. Ramzah, we can see your slide now.
I'm very sorry. I have a little bit problem with the. Okay. Anyway, can we go to the next slide, please? This would be my simple outline of my sharing session. So I do not know whether this is necessary, but I will just introduce Malaysia a little bit and the specific region where we are, the University Malaysia of Sabah, which is Sabah and Borneo. And I would also probably give some overviews of our faculty. What is the academic programs that we have in UMS and also the research opportunities, yeah? And then finally, I would like to share the potential networking programs, especially in terms of research and academic activities that some of you here may find interesting to be pursued or explored further, yeah? Next slide, please. I don't think that this is really relevant, but this is Malaysia. we are very close to Thailand. Actually, in fact, we share borders at the northern part of our peninsula and the southern part of Thailand. However, University Malaysia Sabah is not located in the peninsula Malaysia, but we are in Borneo. That is another island, and it is more or less 2.5 hours by flight from Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, to Kota Kinabalu, where our university is located. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, yeah. Under the Malaysia Education Blueprint, we are trying to be one of the research destination. And what does it mean? Can we go to the next slide, please? If you can see, this is the policy for Malaysian higher education. And as you can see, the items number 7 and 8, that is explicitly expressed where we want to be part of the global ecosystem when it comes to education. And can we go to the next slide, please? This is too detailed. I'm not going to explain it, but basically, this just shows how serious Malaysia is in pushing its university, local university, especially public university, to achieve international recognition. And that is why, as Prof mentioned just now, collaboration between international university is very, very much encouraged in Malaysia. Next slide, please. This is University Malaysia Sabah. We are also part of the big dream of the higher education policy in Malaysia. So we definitely try to find a way how to position ourselves within the global ecosystem in education. And I think what we are having tonight is part of the effort towards that. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is the academic entities that we have in UMS. As you can see there, altogether we have 13 faculties and academy, and 6 of those 13 are dedicated to the fields of art, social science, and humanities. The other 7 are pure and applied science. But if you look at the division between soft and hard science, it is quite balanced, yeah? So we are not really focusing only on science or only on social science or humanity. It is quite balanced. We are a comprehensive university. Next slide, please. Okay, this is for the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. Probably this is the most relevant faculty for our discussion tonight, because we are focusing on humanities program. So we have, as you can see there, we have 6 academic programs under this faculty: communication, industrial relation, sociology and anthropology, international relation, geography, history. And actually, we also have few other programs for humanities, such as linguistics and performing arts. Next slide, please. This is for the postgraduate programs, and probably I think that this one is probably more representative of University Malaysia Sabah when it comes to the field of humanities, because as you can see there, especially the bottom part, you can see there that we also offer creative and visual arts. Actually, this is the academy where Prof Law is attached to, and also musics. Yeah. Next slide, please. This is the vision of our university, just sharing, but perhaps this is not really necessary for me to explain in details here. Next slide, please. Okay, this one is the research and innovation ecosystem that we have in UMS. So as you can see, we have research entities on the right, which are dealing with the subject matter and the substance, like biotechnology or indigenous study, humanities, tourism, and etc. On the right, what you can see is we also have service entities, which are facilitating our research with administration, for example, providing facility and also financial support for our researchers in undertaking their projects. So basically what we are having here is we have the research entities where our researchers is there dealing with the subject matter, the substance, and they are facilitated by the service entities. So the service entities, some are dealing with financial matter, some are dealing with facility, labs, and some are dealing with the procedure when getting the permits from authority agency, especially when going to the fieldwork. Next slide, please. Now, this is the research niche that we have in our university. We have 20 public universities in Malaysia, and the Ministry of Higher Learning, and University, they basically assign a specific niche to each one of these public universities. So this is our niche for UMS. And if you can see there, I think the items, the third items, development and empowerment of indigenous people, and also the fifth item, tourism and social innovation. This is probably where the humanities can fit into. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just sharing some of our ecosystem and what we are doing. This is our industry partners. Prof. Law, just now, he already mentioned about getting funding from the industry. So this is some of the industry that we have. We are partnering in research and some academic activities. Yeah. Next slide, please. This is just to show some our international collaborators that we have. We have some kind of cooperation, whether in a form of memorandum of understanding and also memorandum of agreement. Yeah, and hopefully we can, we can have many more, especially from Thailand. Next slide, please. This is just some of the highlights of our research project, especially those with elements of knowledge transfer to the community. Next, please. This is another example. Yeah, this is more on transfer. As the People University, University Malaysia Sabah is known as the People University. So one of the reasons why we are established 25 years ago in Sabah is because the government want to see the university as one of the catalysts for development. So it is not just about generating knowledge, but also creating knowledge, creating innovation, creating technology, and transfer it to the community and also industry. Next slide, please. Now, this is the list of our ongoing research project, which are closely associated probably with the field in humanities. Yeah. Next slide, please. Game Changer programs is probably one of our signature project. What is Game Changer program actually? It is a research project with the emphasis on knowledge and technology transfer. So we craft the research project in such way that we can play the role as the solution provider to the societal and industrial issues. So even though probably when we are talking about technology or innovation being transferred to the community or industry, we think that that is only for science, for hard science, field. But actually, humanities can also play the roles quite significantly, especially when it comes to trying to understand the people. Even the technology that we are trying to transfer is probably very mechanic or very engineering in nature, but we still need to understand the very people that we want to transfer that into. So humanities play a significant part of that one. Next, please. This one, this just sharing an overview of some of the project. We have Eco River Petagas, Kina Geopark, Bioeconomy, Sovereignty, and Empowerment via Education and Technology. All are very much community-centric project. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, this is another research specific on the indigenous people of Borneo. In Sabah alone, and Sabah is only, I think, is only 1/4 of what we have in Borneo. In Borneo, we have state of Sabah and Sarawak, which is under Malaysia. We also have Brunei, a country on its own, and we also have Kalimantan. Kalimantan is under Indonesia. So in Sabah alone, not the entire Borneo, in Sabah alone, we have more than 33 ethnics of indigenous group. And they are all marginal and underprivileged compared to the mainstream ethnic groups in Malaysia. Yeah? And that is the reason why we dedicate a specific research niche to look into this issue. Next, please. Yeah, this is another example of community-driven research project. Yes, a classic, another probably, I would say a classic example of knowledge and technology transfer to the real stakeholders on the ground. And this one is focusing on the community. Next slide, please. We also have a group of researchers working on COVID-related projects from various aspects, be it related to the impact of economy, health, education, tourism, and etc. And humanities is also, our humanities researchers are part of this project. Next slide, please. This is the end of my presentation and probably the most interesting part of my presentation, how we can collaborate and how we can work together. So I have 6 items there, and that is how we can work together. The first one, probably we can have a collaborative project. We may choose one specific area of research where the interests of both university, yours and ours, can be served. The funding arrangement, this is something that we can discuss further, and after identifying the potential project that we are keen to work together. We have a scheme that we call matching grant scheme. Matching grant scheme. What does it mean? If my university and your university are keen to work on certain project, then we can both, put some fund into that project, and we can work together. So we can exchange expertise, and we also so we can optimize the resources. The other one is student and staff exchange. That is also possible. Okay. We also would like to invite a research fellow and postdoc from our, our other university. Say, for example, if researchers from your university would like to attach in one of our departments in University Malaysia Sabah, that is most welcome. And we normally provide facility for that. Yeah, we normally. Because I think that would be a great opportunity for us to exchange expertise and also experience, so we can grow together. The other one is supervision, and this is also we really encourage this supervision, because this is also one of the strategy that our Ministry of Higher Education is focusing on. Because if we have supervision, joint supervision from international university, that would definitely will increase our visibility. And that is what we are looking for, because global international prominence is one of the end game that our Ministry of Higher Education is going for at the moment. We can also plan joint seminar, expo, or exhibition. Like what we have now. This is also part, something like this. Probably Prof Law under your Confucius Institute, we can organize more joint seminar in the future. Yeah, on certain we can focus on certain specific subject. Yeah, and the last one would be publication. So we know that. I mean, I know that I'm not saying that we are so obsessed with world ranking, but I think for university like in Malaysia, because we really need to get noticed at the international level. Probably for university in the more advanced country, that is no longer the aim, but for us to get noticed, because that will help us to get funding from international when people really recognize and know us. So publication with international authors from other universities, from other countries, that will definitely increase, and that will also help us to get more citation because of the collaboration. So that is something that we can explore together. So with that, I think that is all that I can share. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Okay, everyone. Before we would get to the other speaker, maybe it is that I'm out duty to make a short summary, some sort of brief summary for the previous talk from Professor Kok On and Associate Professor Ramzah Dambul, both in English in a summary and also in Thai. I would like two professors to correct me if I'm wrong with your talk. Okay, please, because it is I'm to confess that it is the first time for me to get into the precious knowledge like this on networking in the humanities. Okay, from Professor Dr. Kok On, he talks about the opportunities for humanities, which is rather to enhance the sort of strength in qualitative knowledge. But however, for the UMAs and also the many colleges and universities in Malaysia, it is with lots of challenges. However, for the Ministry of Education in Malaysia, there are two common grants that are applied for the research project in humanities. Research on languages, literature. Researchers in Malaysia can have the resource of the grants from the government, which can be divided into two schemes. Those two schemes are fundamental research grant scheme, sorry, and the long-term research grant scheme. Maybe the researchers are to find the budget from private firm, especially from the industrial sector. However, it is to depend on the field of the academic. And what is rather especially important, it would be the sort of creativity of researchers, that those researchers are to get themselves to show that they are to have sort of creative research proposals, such as the interesting things, such as on Sabah folk tales, maybe, such as the studies of languages, especially such as the languages of Mandarin, maybe, and also the Chinese beliefs. And Professor Kok On tells us that for us to get a good network, is this as we are to think of looking for the support of research grants, and we are to look to work with researchers from another field, not just only the researchers on field. The next talk from Professor Dambul. He talks about some collaborations that he has done in Malaysia. He talks about the University of Malaysia Sabah, or UMS, which aim for the quality of graduates, the quality of institution, and the overall system of the educational system. Especially for the faculty of social science and humanities, there are sort of 6 undergrads programs, including sort of communication studies, performing arts, sociology, industrial relation, something like that. However, those faculties are to seek towards research excellence too, not just only the sort of study. So the UMAs are to think of the entities which are to work together, which are called service entities and research entities. Those research entities are to include research units and research centers. And it is driven by sort of a research niche, especially with this sort of a discipline-centric or research done with the issue driven from the industrial sector, something like that. Okay. Research kit ecosystem is to accelerate pace of innovation and international collaboration. The collaboration that professors has been doing is to make a sort of a memorandum of understanding and agreement to Europe or Southeast Asia or East Asian countries. And again, it is aimed not just only studying knowledge, but about research and innovation. And the last point is to talk about the potential networking areas for further discussion, which is the thing which we look for to this evening. About research and innovation, we must have a sort of collaboration in research and innovation. Maybe we are to do the thing which is to make the collaboration strengthen, such as to do the student exchange or staff exchange, or to exchange a sort of a research fellow, or do the program of postdoc, sort of supervision. And maybe we are to make some sort of joint seminars, exhibition, such as we can do the sort of Confucius Institute in Thailand and International Confucius Institute together, something like that. And especially the international publications. And this is the summary in English, and now in Thai. Okay. นะครับก็วันนี้นะครับก็เรื่องของการที่จะมองหาลู่ทางนะครับแล้วก็การสร้างเน็ตเวิร์กนะเราได้มีการที่จะพูดถึงการมองหาเน็ตเวิร์กนะของการวิจัยนะของการสร้างความร่วมมืออะไรต่ออะไรพวกนี้นะครับแล้วก็ท่านโปรเฟสเซอร์ทั้ง2ท่านนะครับนะจากมาเลเซียนะครับก็ได้กล่าวถึงนะครับการทำซึ่งการหาการวิจัยนะฮะแล้วก็การหาเน็ตเวิร์กนี้เนี่ยนะครับที่เป็นตัวอย่างที่ท่านได้ทำที่มาเลเซียนะครับที่ UMS นะฮะท่านProfessor Kok On นะครับก็ได้กล่าวถึงเรื่องของงานวิจัยนะครับที่อยู่ในทางสายมนุษยศาสตร์ นะฮะนี่เนี่ยนะครับว่าก็คือที่ถ้าทำที่ UMS นั้นเนี่ยนะฮะก็มนุษยศาสตร์เนี่ยก็จะมองว่าเป็นเรื่องของการวิจัยในทางสายศาสตร์ทางด้านภาษานะครับวรรณกรรมคดีปรัชญาศาสนาแล้วก็ในทางด้านศิลปะนะครับนะพบว่าที่รัฐบาลที่มาเลเซียนั้นเนี่ยนะครับก็จะมีresearch grant นะฮะงบทุนวิจัยอะไรเนี่ยนะครับที่รัฐบาลเขาให้นั้นเนี่ยนะก็จะมองออกมาเป็น2 สกีมนะคือมองแบบที่ว่ามี fundamental scheme นะครับแล้วก็แบบที่ว่าเป็นมูลฐานเนี่ยแล้วก็อีกแบบหนึ่งก็คือแบบ long term scheme เนี่ยนะก็คือให้แบบค่อนข้างจะเป็นเวลาที่ค่อนข้างยาวอะไรแบบนี้นะครับแต่ว่าที่เขาก็มักจะมองหากันเนี่ยเพราะว่าโดยมากงานวิจัยมันจะต้องพึ่งพาเนี่ยก็คือการหาเรื่องของงบทุนวิจัยเนี่ยนะที่มาจาก private firm ทั้งหลายนะครับจากพวกทางภาคเอกชนนะภาคส่วนเอกชนที่ว่าน่าจะมีประเด็นให้งบวิจัยนะแล้วก็ให้นักวิชาการนักวิจัยในมาเลเซียได้วิจัยแบบนี้นะครับมันก็เลยทำให้นักวิชาการนักวิจัยในมาเลเซียนั้นเนี่ยก็เลยต้องมองหาว่าน่าจะหางบทุนวิจัยจากที่ไหนนะโดยสอดคล้องนะครับกับผลงานการสร้างสรรค์อะไรเนี่ยแล้วก็แนวความคิดสร้างสรรค์ในการวิจัยนั้นเนี่ยที่ตนเองมีนะครับนะเช่นก็เท่าที่เห็นว่ามีนั้นเนี่ยนะเช่นเรื่องของคติชนวิทยาแบบนี้นะครับหรือเรื่องทางภาษาโดยเฉพาะในทางภาษาจีนแมนดารินแบบนี้นะครับแล้วก็ส่วนที่เกี่ยวข้องกับความเชื่อคติชนอะไรของชาวจีนในมาเลเซียอะไรแบบนั้นนะครับแล้วก็เป็นที่ย้ำนะครับว่าการมองหาเน็ตเวิร์กนั้นเนี่ยเป็นเรื่องสำคัญมากๆเลยนะครับที่จะต้องมองหาเน็ตเวิร์กแบบนี้ก็เลยทำให้นักวิจัยวิชาการเนี่ยนะของเขาก็เลยต้องรู้จักที่จะทำงานนะร่วมกันกับนักวิจัยในสาขาอื่นนะครับ Professor รองศาสตราจารย์ดรรัมซาดัมบูนะครับก็ได้มากล่าวต่อเนื่องนะครับว่าที่ UMS นั้นเนี่ยนะครับเป็นมหาวิทยาลัยนะที่มุ่งที่จะสร้างผู้เรียนนั้นเนี่ยนะให้มีคุณภาพนะครับก็คือสร้างบัณฑิตที่จบออกไปหรือว่าแม้กระทั่งสร้างเรื่องของตัวสถาบันเองนะแล้วก็ระบบการบริหารการศึกษาของสถาบันบริหารการวิจัยของสถาบันนั้นเนี่ยนะครับให้มีคุณภาพนะครับคณะมนุษยศาสตร์และสังคมศาสตร์นะครับที่ UMS นั้นเนี่ยนะก็พบว่ามีการเรียนระดับปริญญาตรีนะครับในสาขาทางสังคมศาสตร์วิทยาศาสตร์ที่เกี่ยวข้องเนี่ยนะก็เท่าที่เห็นก็คือมีอย่างเช่นเรื่องของการสื่อสารนะครับเรื่องของภาคบริการอุตสาหกรรมแบบนี้นะครับแล้วก็เรื่องการแสดงนะสังคมวิทยามนุษยวิทยาเรื่องภาษานะครับ communication อะไรพวกนี้นะครับทั้งหลายทั้งปวงคือเพื่อเป็นไปเพื่อresearch excellence นะคือความเป็นเลิศในทางด้านการวิจัยนะครับที่ UMS นั้นเนี่ยเขามีการมองว่านะหน่วยงานของการวิจัยนั้นเนี่ยนะครับควรจะมีการควบคู่กันนะฮะระหว่างหน่วยงานบริการ service entities นะครับแล้วก็หน่วยงานทางด้านวิจัยนะครับหน่วยงานทางด้านวิจัยเนี่ยเขาก็จะมีหน่วยวิจัยกับศูนย์วิจัยอะไรพวกนี้นะครับโดยที่ว่าเวลาจะมองหาเรื่องของการวิจัยนั้นเนี่ยนะก็จะมองโดยเป็นเรื่องของ issue driven นะคือถึงแม้จะมีแกนกลางนะเป็นเรื่องของศาสตร์แต่ละศาสตร์แต่ว่าก็จะถูกผลักดันนะโดย issue ที่เกี่ยวข้องกับศาสตร์ของผู้วิจัยผู้นั้นๆนะครับนะฮะแล้วก็การที่จะมีบรรยากาศของงานวิจัยนะมีระบบนิเวศอะไรของการวิจัยพวกนั้นเนี่ยนะคือเป็นไปเพื่อการสร้างความร่วมมือนะครับก็เลยเห็นว่านะความร่วมมือนั้นเนี่ยนะก็จะออกมาเป็นพวก MOU บ้างอะไรพวกนี้ที่ไปยุโรปบ้างนะประเทศใน Southeast Asia นะเห็นท่านเล่าว่าก็ประเทศไทยนี้ก็มีนะครับแล้วก็ไปทางประเทศในทางเอเชียตะวันออกนะฮะก็เป็นที่เน้นย้ำนะครับว่าการที่เรียนรู้นั้นเนี่ยในมหาวิทยาลัยเลยพวกนี้เนี่ยนะก็คงไม่ใช่แค่เรื่องเรียนรู้เนื้อหาแต่ว่าเป็นเรื่องของการผลักดันให้เกิดการวิจัยแล้วก็นวัตกรรมด้วยนะครับมีการวิจัยที่เกี่ยวข้องกับเรื่องของชาติพันธุ์วิทยานะครับของคนพื้นเมืองนะครับในมาเลเซียด้วยนะก็เรื่องนี้ก็เป็นเรื่องที่ผลักดันเพราะว่าเมื่อกี้เห็นก็มีเล่าว่ามีการที่จะพูดถึงการที่คนพื้นเมืองได้มีส่วนในการพัฒนาประเทศอะไรแบบนั้นนะครับโดยเฉพาะที่เกี่ยวข้องกับการที่คนพื้นเมืองอาจจะได้มีเรื่องของ eco tourism นะท่องเที่ยวเชิงนิเวศแบบนี้เนี่ยนะเขาจะได้เหมือนกับว่าเช่นอาจจะสร้างการท่องเที่ยวที่ยั่งยืนอะไรแบบนั้นนะครับนะแล้วก็จบท้ายด้วยนะฮะว่าการที่จะสร้างเน็ตเวิร์กนี้เนี่ยนะให้มีพละกำลังเข้มแข็งเนี่ยก็คงต้องอาศัยการที่จะทำในหลากหลายด้านนะครับแล้วก็คงเป็นที่ได้ปรึกษากันต่อไปนะครับว่าจะมีด้านไหนบ้างนะแต่ที่น่าจะเป็นไปได้นะครับก็คือเรื่องความร่วมมือทางวิจัยและนวัตกรรมนะครับการแลกเปลี่ยนนิสิตนักศึกษานะแลกเปลี่ยนสตาฟนะฮะ นะระหว่างกันนะครับแล้วก็โปรแกรมพวกresearch fellow นะหรือว่าโปรแกรม postdoc นะครับก็เป็นที่สำคัญเหมือนกันนะครับนะหรือว่าการให้คำปรึกษาในทางด้านการวิจัยนะเป็นsupervision อะไรแบบนั้นนะฮะแล้วก็อาจจะมีการสัมมนานะครับความร่วมมือกันทางด้านสัมมนายกตัวอย่างเช่นเป็นไปได้ไหมนะครับที่สถาบันของจื่อนะครับจะได้มีการแลกเปลี่ยนสัมมนากันในทำนองแล้วก็ที่สำคัญที่สุดนะครับก็คือความร่วมมือในด้านการสร้างผลงานตีพิมพ์เผยแพร่ระดับนานาชาตินะครับOkay, and that's the summary from the previous talks of the two professors. I may have to say that it is the two lectures are rather touching, and it is full with sort of precious knowledge for us this evening. Okay, and the next one. We would like to welcome Dr. Paul Michael Taylor to give us your lecture. Dr. Paul Michael Taylor is the director of the Asian Cultural History Program and curator of Asian, European, and Middle Eastern Ethnology from Smithsonian Institution, Washington, D.C., the United States. Okay, please, Professor.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much to our hosts at Kasetsart University, to the Dean, who has Professor Kitima, who has once again extended great hospitality to me by inviting me to this webinar, and to Professor Theptawee. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm quite sure that your summary in Thai will be much better than my paper. But I so much appreciated also the papers from my distinguished colleagues, Professor Loh and Professor Ramzah, about Sabah and about our topic of research and networking. Sabah is one of the great interesting places also. For me, I spent a lot of time in Kalimantan, although not Sabah. And I myself, even back to my days during my PhD dissertation, lived for about 3 years in small villages, without electricity or running water, on Pulau Halmahera. Halmahera is just east of Sulawesi. So it's compared with where I am now in Washington, it's not so far from Sabah or Thailand. And in fact, that's where one result was this book on the folk biology of the people of Halmahera, ideas about animals and plants. Our topic, opportunities for research and networking, was one that I enjoyed hearing about the situation in Sabah and Southeast Asia. I think our ecology of research and networking is rather different here, but the principles are quite the same. It was so interesting to hear the comments, though, from my colleagues, because I would say that a lot of people have very different approaches to this issue of how to be a successful researcher or networker, and the two are closely combined. And I think a challenge for our institutions is to make sure that several different kinds of productivity get recognized. You have the lonely scholar who never really has many contacts, but spends a lot of time in the laboratory or the library, quietly writes grants and is sometimes successful and does great work. But then you also have team builders and international collaborators. And these are both kinds of productivity, really, that should be recognized. I would say that there were some suggestions that I heard that don't strike to me to be the way we necessarily operate here. I would just mention two, for example, the advice to young researchers to apply lots of places. I think in some cases that's advice I've given people as well, when they're applying for graduate school, when they're applying for jobs, and so on. But there is more of a tradition here. When you apply for lots of jobs and you get more than one, or you apply to get admitted to many different graduate schools and then get admitted to more than one. You can easily turn some down and pick only one of them. And everyone agrees that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But there's less common tradition of getting big grants and then turning them down. It is problematic in many ways if you do that too often. So we sometimes have to be careful not to apply for too many, because if you get too many grants at once, you are overextended and you're concentrating too much on managing the administrative aspects of your grants rather than on research. And this is something that I think we also think about here. The other point was about the importance for networking of a memorandum of understanding. I would say that's not really our experience, although I have personally negotiated and been involved with many memoranda of understanding with major like ministries of culture overseas, but also with institutions. But we have a joke here. We say a good memorandum of understanding and about $4 will get you a very good cup of coffee. The reason is a very good cup of coffee costs about $4. So to get it or anything else, you don't really need the memorandum of understanding. What you need is a partnership of some kind. And I will also say, and I will give some examples of various partnerships. In some cases, we're working with countries where people are very reluctant to sign memoranda of understanding because it's not clear who's really has the authority to sign an agreement with a foreign organization. And that's true of many countries, although it's certainly also something I recognize that in other countries, including apparently Malaysia, that people are very anxious to have memoranda of understanding. We always worry that having a memorandum of understanding implies big promises. And unless there's a base of funding and definite certainty that something will happen, we are reluctant to mislead people with too many expectations. I'd like to share my screen, please, if I may. Let's see. I hope that works, and I will now switch to slideshow from beginning. Now I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. And this is my subject of my conversation. And when we talk about research and networking, I'm going to give you a lot of examples that show that from the perspective of how we operate here, research and networking really go together very well. Although, as I mentioned earlier, there are some people who seem to do good research by themselves. Like there are writers and poets who sit home all day, every day, for their whole life writing poems. And anyway, I'd like to start with a kind of example of international cooperation in museum research and collections and public programs. Working in a big research institution that is also a museum is inherently a different kind of ecological setting from a university, but we do have very close associations with universities, and all of us come from universities, of course, as well. The one example that I'd like to just mention to illustrate several points is the Indonesian traveling exhibition and publication. This is Beyond the Java Sea, Art of Indonesia's Outer Islands. Here's actually the book that I did from this exhibition. And the reason I think this is a good example, first, it is also from Southeast Asia, but also it shows how far removed from what you're trying to accomplish you sometimes go to accomplish a smaller goal. And I think that this can be a very effective means of any kind of imagination of a research or networking project. Sometimes it's best to think small, but sometimes, as in this case, it was very effective to think big. And in this case, we had a traveling exhibition that went to 4 continents, opened in Texas and came to Washington. It went to San Francisco, and then Leiden in the Netherlands, and went to Jakarta, and then 2 venues in Australia, in Sydney and Brisbane. And it all began with an effort to try to help Indonesia's national museum system. And this is the oldest museum in Asia. Wisely, the people who built it only wrote museum on top. So it doesn't matter how many times it changed its name. In its courtyard and main entrance, the royal gift from His Majesty King Chulalongkorn of an elephant. This is a Thai elephant. And so informally, this museum is often called in Indonesia, Museum Gajah, the Elephant Museum. But if you can imagine, back in 1987, 88, 89, as I was working on Indonesian collections here at the Smithsonian, and I visited, believe it or not, that's me in 1989, and going through their collections, we found that the storage in those days was underneath the displays. Actually, the earliest Smithsonian, as I'll show you soon, had display cases like this as well, with storage underneath the display cases. And I use these examples with the permission of my colleagues at the National Museum of Indonesia. My colleagues there had many things that they cared about and really wanted to see happen. And their goals were things that were difficult to imagine how we could fund them and do them unless we did something rather different. For example, this is in the storage areas. This one is up on top of some cases. And it had no information associated with what it was, but it had an old number on it. So I knew that somewhere we would find the records. It's covered with dust. It needs conservation work. Their goal was to clean it up and find out what it was. So what's the problem with doing that? Because very few people actually, in any big way, want to fund conservation work that fixes something up and then puts it in storage. Just like it's hard to get people to fund a quiet research project, even one that is so important. Like for me, folk tales of the peoples of Sabah, that would be, if I were in charge of a big corporation, that would be one of my top priorities. But unfortunately, the top corporations don't have such people in charge of them. So how do we get people to support such a project? And it's very difficult to do. And here's another example. This one is actually on display, but it had been on display at least, since about the 1920s. And in the course of that time, it had serious conservation issues. I should have been saying, by the way, this is the prow ornament, or the ornament at the front of a boat from a sultanate in southern Borneo. This is a drum with an ancestor figure holding it, and the drum head is the head of the ancestor figure, but the tympanum has been broken. It's from Tanimbar Island in the southeastern Maluku Islands. So you see here, looking inside and peeling back the tympanum, people have stuck all things in it and so on. So our first step, of course, is just going through photographing, imagining, what is the range of things, what is the scope of a research project, and then developing a concept of what we were going to do. And this is one of those cases where a few $1,000s that it would take to restore or do conservation work and put something back in storage cannot be found. But ironically, many hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a big exhibition can be found, because in the course of doing an exhibition, you are making a large audience familiar with the largesse and goodwill of the corporations that fund the exhibition. I use this as just one example. There are many provinces in Indonesia that I visited at that time. This is Nusa Tenggara Barat, the Lombok, and the provincial museums also we borrowed from. Long story short, we did this exhibition with its catalog. It traveled around the world. And at the very entrance to the exhibition, I made sure that I put you see there on the right, the fully restored prow ornament from Borneo, along with another prow ornament from Borneo on the left. So that people walked past it and they didn't really know the secret story, but this is what got us thinking we have to do something big. So sometimes having a small goal in mind leads you to think that the only way to accomplish it is to put it in the context of a much larger goal. For this project, we also developed a training program and for museum staff members throughout Indonesia. And they had a very nice exchange with the Smithsonian, where the visitors came and participated in every stage of developing the project. And of course, as I mentioned, the exhibition later also went to Jakarta. I will also mention that there were a lot of other aspects, educational materials. This is a family guide for kids and families to use. Ancillary programs. We had a film series about Indonesia. And this was the Smithsonian Libraries put up an exhibition of books about Indonesia. And it traveled, as I mentioned, this is the brochure from San Francisco, the great invitation, quite a number of cabinet members from the Indonesian cabinet came to San Francisco for this. And we're wonderful to get sponsorship at that time, Chevron and Texaco. And since then, they both combined into the same corporation. And here was the brochure when it went to Leiden in the Netherlands, and the booklet that I did separately for the exhibition in its 2 venues in Australia. This is the kind of project we like to do, but we can't do very many of them because you have to pick them carefully. This is not the sort of project where you can send out a whole bunch of grant proposals to lots and lots of people. You have to pick very carefully. And a lot of the development of the funding comes from the network and relationships. The text of the grant proposals themselves is just a few pages by the time everything is worked out. So it's quite different from the kind of funding method that we're talking about in some of our other talks. This is done from our program within the Smithsonian, which is called the Asian Cultural History Program. So it's necessarily a research program because it's in the Anthropology department. But we have a number of very specific gift funds: Korean heritage, Sikh heritage. We have a Heritage of Thailand fund, which started in 1982. And that has funded some very wonderful projects, such as this book, Treasures of 2 Nations, on our Thai royal gifts. Here, I'm not going to be talking about those royal gifts, but our Thailand Heritage Project has been very active. And in fact, in recent years, 5 different issues of the Journal of the Siam Society have papers that I did about our Thai collections. We have very important old Thai collections, and that's an area of research collaboration that I'm going to get to in a moment, is legacy collections. So there are many examples of international projects, and I'll just go through and illustrate a couple of them. So the Asian Cultural History Program within our administrative structure is inside the Anthropology department. Now here, I want to just mention a few examples. The Sackler Gallery is an art museum within the Smithsonian, and we have developed projects with them as well. And this is an example, an exhibition and book that's done by one of the curators of the Sackler Gallery and the Museum of Asian Art. But the collection is basketry from a particular basket maker. I mean, I have to say, I would love to do something like this. A particular craft person who does a range of different types of the same craft, lacquerware, or basketry or something from Thailand or from Sabah. Instead of a big range of treasures of Thailand, it would be great to just pick a particular craft person in one village and look at the apprenticeship system. This is a very good, serious research project. And sometimes it's hard to do in one country, but if you team up with a museum from overseas, the research project becomes possible, and all parties benefit because the museum also has a lasting collection from the craft person or the local artist. So we accessioned the basketry in our museum, many different types that he made, and the careful documentation was done by somebody else from the other museum. And he's just a wonderful person. I met him later when he visited Washington during the exhibition. This is another example. Regional photographer Eduardo Master. He is from Luzon Island in the Philippines and was one of the preeminent regional photographers of the Philippines. We wanted to have some examples in his collection, but it's very expensive, and he sells his original signed prints for a reasonable price. So we developed, thanks to Mobile Corporation who funded this, a plan for an exhibition of his photographs and purchase of the collection. But for the exhibition, we didn't use the original photographs. We used copy prints that were designed to the size that we wanted so they could easily travel. And that exhibition also traveled to many venues around the United States. Then we sent it to Europe. It went to London and Paris and Vienna and ended up in Spain. And when in Spain, with this exhibition open at the National Museum of Anthropology there, we organized a conference on visual documents and cultural representations with the National Museum. And this was our celebration in 1998 of the 100th anniversary of the Spanish-American War. That year, 1998, was filled with commemorations in Spain. And this was ours. And it was very appropriate because Eduardo Master was the son of a Kankanai indigenous woman from Luzon Island. And the father was a Spanish officer who at the end of the war stayed in the Philippines and lived in Highland Luzon in the tribal areas. So he grew up there and he learned photography from an American missionary. So this one art form and artist sort of united Spain, indigenous Philippines, and the United States in a way that no sort of diplomatic paperwork could have done. And it was a very striking exhibition to accomplish a lot of purposes. And well, there's lots more to say about this exhibition, but I should move on here, still thinking about time. There used to be a program that has been superseded by another similar program now within American Association of Museums called International Partnerships Among Museums. I mentioned earlier that some countries don't want to have their institutions signing memoranda of understanding with foreign organizations. Actually, Saudi Arabia at that time we worked on this was like that. But we developed back in the year 2000 a joint exhibition with the National Museum of Saudi Arabia. And this is some of our team. The exhibition was called The Written in Stone, Inscriptions from the National Museum of Saudi Arabia. And this is an ongoing publication project. And we look forward to continuing this long-standing good relationship with the National Museum of Saudi Arabia. But this is a case where the National Museum there could not sign an agreement with us, but what they could do is apply for funds. So by jointly applying for the same grant to fund the partnership, we basically did not need a memorandum of understanding because everything we wanted to do was already signed by both parties as when we were applying for funds. Also, we solved the problem of not having a lot of promises about what we want to do that we could not keep later. And that would have happened if the grant had never been given. So by having a joint grant application instead of a memorandum of understanding, we feel we solved this issue quite well. Anyway, this is just a commentary on some of the discussions that were brought up earlier from our colleagues in Sabah. And anyway, here are just a few of the images of the various different examples of material from Saudi Arabia. I want to mention the importance also for international collaboration of legacy collections. I do believe a lot of old material exists in museums that has not been properly identified. And we will continue to find new discoveries of a great importance about Thailand and maybe also about Sabah in museums from the past. This is the National Museum of Denmark. It's of course an old Danish royal palace, and the National Museum of Denmark, like the National Museum of Ethnology, as it was used to be called in Netherlands and other museums, was formed around the original Royal Cabinet of Curiosities, this Renaissance cabinet or collection of exotic items that the royal family of Denmark assembled. Going back to study those oldest collections from the 16th, 17th century, we find very interesting Southeast Asian examples. You recognize this is cloves and nutmegs. I mean, there's only one place these could have come from. It's Eastern Indonesia. These things probably came from Halmahera, you know, where I lived. But here they are in the Renaissance, and they have been put together as cloveware and turned into goblets in a very European style. So that is already a connection with Eastern Indonesia that exists in these old Renaissance collections, and often misidentified. You know, this example was misidentified, so was this one. And in different catalogs, in different catalogs of the 17th and 18th century, this was called an African fetish or an Aztec god. Of course, it's not African or Mexican. Look at it. I know this is an Indonesian, Javanese wooden puppet. And these kinds of old catalogs simply must be checked again. And you will find a lot of very interesting sources of information about ancient Southeast Asia, I believe, in these collections. Now, in this case, there's a limited amount that you can tell about headgear, about textiles, and so on. But still, it's a new source of information that had not been identified before. This is from nowhere in Indonesia that we know now, but it must be from somewhere in Eastern Indonesia, around Sulawesi, Maluku, Borneo maybe, but more likely farther east. It's, you know, this is from Renaissance times. So when you get a 16th or 17th century shield like this, if that's what it is, it's a beautifully made, it doesn't, from the underneath, it appear to be a hat. It's a beautifully decorated piece, but the decorations do not exactly correspond to any particular decorations, only to general forms that you find in the region. So this is something that has a form that has become extinct, but it's from that area of the world. And with greater research and new techniques, possibly DNA analysis of the plants that are used and so on, we might be able to find out more about it. I'm using these just as simple examples that this is the kind of thing that does need collaborative research. I mean, how could you do that without having a local partner willing to investigate this, without having a local partner willing to collect again the kinds of plants that are used, you know, the climbing orchids and the rattans and so on that are used to make such things, pandanus, and, you know, carefully looking at DNA of that material that's well documented and clearly identified with a botanical identification. How could you do that without a local partner? So these are the kinds of research topics that inherently will always require a local, a kind of international partnership. I'd like to make a couple of points about the history of museums in that respect. This is an old, early photograph of the old Leiden Museum of Ethnology in the 1980s, and it shows the kind of style of museum display used in ethnographic or ethnological museums at that time. I don't have time to say much about it, but I will say that it's very different from an art museum style. is sort of jumbled looking, we can say, and there's often a lot of text. There was a lot of text. I don't have it in this photograph. And that this, the style of museums in ethnological museums was that these were objects of study. The people themselves, the peoples and cultures of Southeast Asia were the object of study. And in the 1980s, there began what was called a movement of decolonization of museums. That movement really started in this museum, the Tropen Museum in Amsterdam. It was formerly called the Colonial Museum. And they changed the name to Tropical Museum, or Tropen Museum in Dutch. And the change that took place was that in decolonization, the peoples of Southeast Asia or any other place in the world whose collections are depicted need to be co-curators. They need to be involved in how their own cultures are depicted and sort of immersive, and you should have them involved in introducing their cultures to the people so that they're speaking for themselves. They're not, this is not on display done by scientists describing them like they were fossils or something, you know. That's the change that they were trying to emphasize. Now, at the same time, there were other trends in museums, and among them in the 20th century, the development of primitive art collections. This is one of the great ones in the world, collected by the late Jean-Paul Barbier. He was shown with his wife when I took this picture in 1989. And they have, you know, these African tribal and primitive arts. They posed in their home. This is in their home. And you see on these two examples, plus a very modern work. And then that was one of the ideas, that the primitive art was, you know, connected to inspiration for a lot of modern art. So they developed something, examples like this, the Musée Barbier-Muller, the Barbier-Muller Museum in Geneva, Switzerland. Very much an art museum, but the subject matter was material from Southeast Asia, like these pieces here. You see the example from the Southeastern Moluccas in front of us. And so the Southeast Asian material was shown as art objects and not as ethnographic objects. These are all the kinds of places that we collaborate with. And the Smithsonian sort of fits into that. And we don't have much time, so I will just have to go very briefly through a bit of introduction to the Smithsonian, that it isn't really, it is our national museum, and it became a national museum at a time when many countries were making national museums, but it really has a very, very different background. In 1826, this person, James Smithson, made his last will and testament. And in it, he said that if later he died without any heirs, his money should go to found in America at Washington, under his name, Smithsonian Institution, an establishment for the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men. Well, that's how they said it at the time, among people. He had never been to America. And there are a lot of speculations. Why would he want to establish such a place? And we can talk about that if there are people interested in the question and answer afterwards. But I would just say that the United States was surprised by this sudden offer. It was not clear that we should even accept from a foreigner this much money to do something that's for this purpose. But in the end, the Smithsonian decided to accept it. They went and picked up the gold coins worth $508,000, which, as you can imagine, in the 1840s was a huge amount of money. And they debated for a long time, what should we make a museum, a university, an observatory, or what? As I mentioned, other places were starting national museums, but this wasn't called initially the National Museums. It was just set up as what we call a trust instrumentality. It's created by Congress for the purpose in Smithson's will. But they set up a board which would leave it to the board to decide how they were going to use the money. And that was going to be carried out by the Secretary and the Board of Regents. So the Smithsonian was founded. This is its first building. And the board still consists of people from both political parties. It's headed by the Chief Justice and has prominent citizens, but it is not part of the administration. So you think of the US government as divided into three parts: executive, judicial, and legislative. Smithsonian is not part of the government. It's set off from the government when a new president is elected and the administration changes. There's no change in the Smithsonian administration. The idea was take science and art and culture and separate it from politics. That was the goal. Of course, it's a goal. I'll just say that. But that was the goal. And originally, you know, we sometimes say 21st century, let's make our spaces all flexible, you know, that we can do lots of things with them. This was not a new thing in the 21st century. This was in 1855. The Smithsonian first building had a lot of different functions. And in the tower here, the tower, the secretary had a place to live too, so they could live in the museum. Still today, the secretary of the Smithsonian is not secretary like Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Interior, who reports to the president. The secretary of the Smithsonian reports to the Board of Regents. And this person helped work with Congress to make the Smithsonian into what was officially called our National Museum. The second building was added in 1881, and this was called the National Museum Building. I do want to mention that you may see here, these display cases, I don't know if you can see my cursor moving here, but these display cases are very, very comparable to the ones that were in Jakarta in the 1980s. I saw that. You see the vitrines on top and storage of the collections underneath. But here's the Japanese no theater masks and other things. So our earliest Thai collections and Borneo collections and so on. Well, actually not the Borneo collections, they came later, most of them, but the earliest Thai collections were here. And in 1910 came what was then called the New National Museum. And that's the present day Natural History Museum. That's the building that I'm speaking to you from now today. And it's right on the National Mall. My windows look over the capital of the United States, and it's a beautiful area. So that's our that was our new National Museum building, now the National Museum of Natural History. And at that time, in 1910, it included the collection of fine arts. So you walk in and there were Greco-Roman statues and there were tons of so on. This is quite different from today, but there's definitely a continuity in mission and form. Just grew and grew and grew. We now have 19 museums and the National Zoo, as well as research centers. I want to mention the National Gallery of Art, which is right just next door to us here, is not part of the Smithsonian. A lot of people make that mistake and think it is, but it's connected. The Secretary of the Smithsonian is ex officio on the National Gallery of Art's board. But the one point I would like to make about the Smithsonian and other museums of worldwide really, is that this old distinction that has developed between art museums and science museums is still very much with us. And when we look at international collaborations, we're often looking at that kind of difference and working across types of museums as well as across countries. The style of display is different. And frankly, the style of research and publications is different. The way scholars who work in an art museum and an art environment get promoted and so on is also different from the way scholars get promoted in a science museum. Look at just the design aspects without all the other ones. You see there's very little text here visible. There's small labels. If you want lots and lots of information, you can find it in a catalog, but the idea is that having too much text, you know, distracts from enjoyment and appreciation of the artwork. Really, museums, as I mentioned with the Cabinet of Curiosities in the Royal Danish Collection, with an earlier slide, museums everywhere derived from the Renaissance Cabinet of Curiosities. And they took different directions. And the art museums developed with their design inspired very much by I would say, churches or places of meditation where light may be dim elsewhere, but it's stronger on the thing that you're looking at, the statue of the saint or the statue of Christ. And you don't have a lot of text there. People meditate, or people have this as a source of inspiration. And similarly, artworks are meditative experiences that you have as sources of inspiration and refinement and enlightenment and so on. And I think that's the tradition that this comes from. I mean, you can make too much of this, but it really is a big distinction in how museums work. Let's look at a different example here. This is in our museum. It's one of many exhibits here, and this is a museum. It would be considered a good museum and a good exhibit in a science museum. You would never see an exhibit like this in an art museum. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, look at this exhibit. First, if you're from an art background, you'd have to say, there is absolutely nothing there. Well, of course there's something there. There's a lot of text, and people got a lot of good training in science museums to make exhibits like this. But there's no object to look at, not one single thing to inspire you. It's all the text and the diagrams and that sort of thing. Anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to say that nowadays, when we try to build exhibits or research projects that are going to cross-cut not only international borders, but also these old, very strong divisions among institutions, we have to really be careful and think through what we're going to do. The example that I gave you earlier, Beyond the Java Sea, the Indonesian exhibition, it opened at a science museum in Texas. Then it came to the Natural History Museum. And then it went to a fine arts museum in San Francisco. So its first three venues, even before it went to other countries, had to cross all the major divisions in museums. So the design had to be the kind of design that would fit an art museum. We would never have had even one section of the exhibit that looked like this one on the screen now. Everything had to look like an art museum, but at the same time, there were levels of text that allowed you to see just a little bit or more. And there was a catalog, well, this one here, with lots more good scientific information. It's not just pictures of it by any means. Anyway, here's another example of science museum exhibit that does have objects, but there are lots of objects and lots of text. So that's just illustrating the point that I was making about the difference between art museums and science museums now. Quickly summarizing the kinds of activities that museums do and where international cooperation can be most useful. Let's start with research, since that's the topic of our conversation. I'd like to focus for this sequence on the publication of source materials. By source materials, I mean old collections, archives, records, and so on. And that's, I mentioned the papers in the Journal of Siam Society. I've been doing a lot of that with our old collections of royal gifts from Thailand as well. But for this, I take the example of the Abbott journals, which I have been working on for many years. But he traveled worldwide. So this is a project that is inherently kind of looking for and inviting collaborators. He lived from 1860 to 1936 and left a large body of correspondence, which I have been transcribing and going through, which is a good guide to help us understand the many collections that he brought back. And he also established some collections that are now in Singapore, and some of his photographs are also in Singapore at the Museum of Asian Civilizations. So he visited Thailand, Borneo, many other places. This is a picture of him with people in Pulau Mentawai. It's in Mentawai somewhere. I think it's Pulau Siberut in Kepulauan Mentawai, off the west coast of Sumatra. And massive numbers of collections came into the Smithsonian Institution in those days. So you don't really find collectors doing this kind of thing much anymore. Have you ever noticed the difference? Why is that? Partly international sort of customs regulations and endangered species rules and so on have made it much harder. But partly the nature of scientific research is a little bit different now, and the collaborations that are inherent include work with places that are very capable of building up the collections locally, so you don't need to bring them to faraway places. But this was the trend in the 19th century. And why was it important? Partly because of this person who is almost unknown now. Otis Mason was leader of, I have to say, the world of anthropology in the United States in the 19th century, the Washington School of Anthropology, think of it then. Again, nobody basically hardly ever reads, and no one hardly reads this work anymore nowadays. I mean, except people like me. And he published Vocabulary of Malaysian Basket Work. This word Malaysian is the old use of the word. It means all of island Southeast Asia in addition to peninsular Malaysia. So it included Philippines and so on. But Abbott never went to the Philippines. He was very strongly anti-colonialist. He was very opposed to efforts by by France to take over Indochina, Thailand, Laos, and other countries who were vying to take over Southeast Asian regions. Anti-colonialist. And when he was so disappointed after 1898 that America became a colonial power in the Philippines, he was very angry and refused to go there. But anyway, these and many other insights come from his correspondence. But Mason basically was studying Malaysian basket work, Southeast Asian basket work, for a very important reason. Is he felt that the study of the evolution of people and societies, which was the big topic in the 19th century, throughout the 19th century, how did civilizations develop? How did societies develop from the lowest, most savage, most barbaric, up to the highest civilizations? That was the topic of the 19th century, not now. So he thought that the way to do that was by looking at technology and the development of technology, and the best, most widespread example that you could use would be basketry. And he developed a very complex system of looking at the relative complexity of baskets. And for this reason, you know, he who had been throughout his life an expert on American Indian baskets, really got so excited by what Mason was sending back from Indonesia, from Thailand, and so on. He urged the finding of the most primitive things as well as the most advanced. Abbott went to discover the basketry of the Chaupa Negrito population of Thailand, for example, and Mason was so interested, he gave that a big section in this book. But for him, the study of baskets was placing societies on a scale from the most primitive to the most advanced. And he thought that the study of these baskets was putting the societies of Southeast Asia between the American Indian most advanced organized societies and the early civilizations of the West. This was the 19th century evolutionist concept, and it's why people were urged to make big collections from a wide range of places in Southeast Asia. I've been going through all of Abbott's old correspondence, like this one from Padang in 1904 to his mother, and then we type it out with volunteers. So this is from Antananarivo in Madagascar. So that's been a huge project, and also his photographs, the historic photographs. But I want to say that the changes since the 19th century, of course, are that whole evolutionist framework for studying societies is completely outmoded, and nobody does it, of course, anymore. I was strongly opposed by Franz Boas and other early 20th century anthropologists. And so if you look at a graph of the percentage of papers in scientific journals that refer to museum collections at all, the graph shows that the height of using museum collections for kind of scholarly studies was in around 1900, and then there's a huge drop off by the 1960s, it was at its lowest point. Nobody was looking at that. I mean, people were saying, how can you dare to say that the Australian Aborigines, despite their lack of high technology, was in any way primitive when they have this complex symbolic system and so on. Anyway, a very different way of thinking, and a much less colonialist way of thinking, as I have to say, where people did argue that these conceptualizations and classificatory systems were part of the reason for the support for the colonial enterprise, which was unjust. So consequently, when thinking about these topics changed, for a while, the use of museum collections also changed. And of course, since the 1970s and 80s, we found totally new interesting uses of museum legacy collections, involvement of the peoples from the regions in studying our collections and how they should be represented and so on. So it's a very different approach. But that is something about our legacy collections that we have now, which is a great resource. Things like this photograph and thousands of others that can benefit from international partnerships in now going back and reinterpreting. So that's research. And in just less than probably 5 minutes, some of our other areas of cooperation include the various components of the exhibitions. And I mentioned already the Beyond the Java Sea exhibition as an example that was tied to research. Educational activities, schools, programs, and so on. So we did an exhibition and a book on Sikhs, Legacy of the Punjab. And that exhibition has been traveling since 2004, or on display and traveling. And continue to publish new papers and books on Sikhs. And there's an exhibition now to which I've just contributed with Sonia Dami, a chapter in Singapore, Sikhs in Singapore, A Story Untold. And I hope that publication will come out soon. Also, outreach with lending and traveling exhibitions, and that Singapore example is a good one because we've included Kapani collection on display in Singapore now. And collections and improving collections, collections management, restoration, access to collections, use of collections. This is a Janam Sakhi from the Punjab. And, you know, it's very important conservation effort needed for this. It's to use the paint called verdigris, which was commonly used in South Asia and to some extent in Southeast Asia. That type of paint is very brilliantly green and it's wonderful when you first see it, but it causes the substrate of paper to be very damaged. So to neutralize it is quite a big job. And just again, the problem, if you just want to try to find support for, you know, conservation work and then putting it away in storage, there's not much support for that. But if you think, well, here's a wonderful old manuscript, it could be published as a new publication. Bigger project sometimes is easier to fund and easier to support than the most urgent little project that you can think of. And that's an example like that. But so collections, again and again, we find that. Just like that first example I showed you of the Borneo prow ornament. You know, you find something that you really want to work on, but you know that as you define that research project and that conservation project, it's, I can say, too small to do, and it needs something bigger. So we have to pick our projects carefully. I think you're getting the sense already of why, what we, in a slang way, call the shotgun approach to funding. That is like shooting a shotgun, which has lots of little pellets to kill a bird. You just hope a few of them will hit it. We don't use that for grant proposals. Usually we try to plan something out and find exactly the right place. And sometimes we're successful, like everybody. And sometimes we're not. Like every place, we have to say that the resources are never enough to do everything that you want to do. So I'm just showing you some examples, things that have sometimes worked, and where international collaboration and collaboration with others and networking is always part of it, where that has been successful. I want to turn to the example of our work sponsored by Chevron in Turkmenistan. This was our 2011 book, Ancient Arts Today, which corresponded with a wonderful event here in Washington with Turkmen performers and some exhibitions. So this was this little book that we did. And we responded with some American performances in Turkmenistan. And then that was in 2012. And then 2013, we joked, we said, we'll do it right this time. We had figured out how to get everybody here and, you know, how to do a good book and so on about Turkmenistan, but we wanted to do something bigger. And so in 2013, we did this again with a much bigger and better book, which is still kind of a classic. And by the way, if I know this, all these books, I have already made sure that the library at Kasetsart University has copies. And so we want to make sure that UNS also gets copies if they don't already have them. And that's something I do want to make sure that happens as one practical result of this seminar, of this conference. So this was the book that we did in association again with people coming from Turkmenistan. And Chevron was a tremendous supporter of this. And so many good results came out of this. The book is called Turkmenistan Arts from the Land of Maktum Guli. From 2014 was declared by Turkmenistan the year of Maktum Guli. But you know, the problem with talking about Maktum Guli is that nobody knew who Maktum Guli was because there wasn't a good English translation yet. And so that became our goal. And I worked with a series of translators and edited this book, Maktum Guli, Poems from Turkmenistan. He was a wonderful national poet of Turkmenistan. His philosophy of aesthetics, and he was a Sufi Islamic poet and thinker. His philosophy is very much expressed in his poetry. And as you see, statue of Turkmenistan showing the dedication that he gets in Turkmenistan. It's got flowers on it from every year. There's an annual Maktum Guli Day there. So this first edition, first printing of our book of poems was, as you see, sponsored by Chevron. And we tried to make it a big, beautifully done book. And this shows an example of one of the poems. And this is how we designed it, you know, so that there'll be the greatness or the importance of the poems would be expressed in the design. I'm very honored. The president of Turkmenistan kindly wrote the introduction to this book. And other online exhibitions include Kazakhstan's that we did about the expeditions of Chokan Velikanov. Using various techniques, we also set up the exhibitions about the cultural finds along the length of the pipelines from Azerbaijan and Georgia and Turkey. These pipelines, I want to use as my last example of sources of support for the humanities. These are the two books. It's actually the same book, but it's bilingual edition. So this one is in English and Georgian, and this one is in English and Azerbaijani, about the cultural finds along the length of the pipeline. Now, in Malaysia and Thailand, many big mega infrastructure projects get done. And we should always try to make sure that in the case of every big construction project, people go in and check whether there are archaeological sites that are being damaged or destroyed in the course of making that freeway or that train track or that, you know, pipeline. If so, they need to be saved. And this was done in Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey for the BTC SCP pipelines, which bring oil and gas from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean. And so that's been a huge project, but it was required by the international lenders that they save the cultural finds. This really should be insisted upon with every major construction project because it is an important source of cultural historical data. And I hope that Southeast Asian governments, encouraged by universities like yours, will always carry out proper studies before big mega infrastructure projects take place. So our purpose was to document the kind of studies and salvage archaeology that was done. And our sponsor was BP, because BP, British Petroleum, was the main builder of these pipelines. So the books and its associated website then allow us to go through and look at each of the sites, like Tobush, Chai, and all of the things that they have in them. Now, the book itself doesn't include all the original site reports, but the website did include all the original original site reports. So for the Georgia, for example, we have the original site reports in Georgian and English, and in Turkey, we have also the original site reports in Turkish and English and so on. So the example I showed before was our written in stone site. So I'm not going to mention it again, but that's the one from Saudi Arabia, a great partnership with the National Museum. And last example is our publication, which you will find at this site, about another big legacy collection. This was done jointly with colleagues in Indonesia as well as the Netherlands, because it was the joint 1926 Dutch and American expedition to what was then Dutch New Guinea, which is now the Indonesian province of Papua. So I wrote the interpretive essays. We have photos and films, historic photographs. Some of them are glass plate negatives when we developed them for the first time still. And the original journals from the expedition and so on. So there's a lot of old legacy collections. That's my main point here. This is one more example. Legacy collections from all over Southeast Asia that are in overseas museums. And it's a very worthy area of international cooperation. We've been honored to be a part of many examples of international cooperation. And that is something that I appreciate and have to say is this particular conference is another example of that kind of cooperation. And once again, I thank our hosts, and I thank the previous speakers from Malaysia and from Sabah. And I also thank all the participants who have been listening patiently. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Professor Taylor. And again, according to my duty, I have to do the summary both in English and Thai. And it is because I'm not a educator or student majoring in sort of a natural historical knowledge. So please, Professor, if you are to correct me if I'm wrong about some point of your presentation, even if I would do it in sort of a brief summary.
No, I'm sure your summary will be better.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll try. According to the lecture of Professor Paul Michael Taylor, he is from the Smithsonian Institution, so his work will be involved so much with the sort of museum studies and sort of how are we to do the thing which is called legacy collections, something like that. So when we are to talk about the research and innovative studies for us to make the possibility of networking, things like this. The Smithsonian Institute has had this sort of knowledge to share with us too, about how are we to get into the research with the museum research and collections. The thing which is about historical knowledge of cultural heritage of everywhere in this world is portrayed at the Smithsonian Institution. And there are many sort of interesting legacy collections. From his research, from Professor Taylor's research, when it gets to the Southeast Asian cultural heritage, he shows us the Indonesian culture, such as the Java Sea culture, culture around the Java Sea, something like that. And he talks about the Indonesian museum system, the perseverance knowledge, which are the sort of cultural collection which shows at the museum. The importance of collaboration, why it is rather important for us to have a collaboration in research of cultural heritage like this, of historical, natural history like this, because not just only that the Smithsonian Institute would show the interest to get into research, maybe in Java, maybe in Indonesia, or in Thailand. Not just only that they are to show their interest of research, but they are to have the collaboration, especially at the field of study, such as if they are to study about the thing sort of a basket maker, or sort of Asian arts, something like that, around Indonesia. They may have to make a collaboration with the Indonesian academics and researchers. Not just only that, they are to show their interest and everything will be all right for them to do their research, but the collaboration is rather necessary for them to get to the field of research. There is a sort of a question asking like, how could you do the sort of research without collaboration? Because for them to get their study into Southeast Asian and historical heritage, they are to have the collaboration, not just only that they are to get the present collaboration, but for them to have the study of what could have been sort of historical collaboration since the ancient time, maybe, because from the historical craft, there are some sort of cultural interrelationships have already been shown, such as from the European culture and the sort of a diffusion of European culture into Southeast Asian culture since the ancient time. It can be interpreted from the craft or from the sort of Asian arts. So if you are to get into research of something like this, again, sort of collaboration is indispensable. And from the Smithsonian history, James Smithson, who is the founder, was with the motto of something like this, to increase and to have the sort of a diffusion of knowledge. If it is to be interpreted by the museum researcher, it means that they are not just only to show the knowledge from the Western world to the Eastern world without making any interpretation, something like that. But the diffusion of knowledge must be in some sort of interpretation. Professor Taylor tells us about the Borneo collections, about the display in the museum, such as art museum in Indonesia. He has had sort of programs in training the curators in the museum in Indonesia to know about how to do the curation jobs, something like that. And he found out that the sort of transdisciplinary knowledge, the sort of the thing which is called to do it post-colonial way, something like that, should be viewed as the indispensable things for the curators at the Indonesian museum, because the Indonesian curators or everywhere curators in any countries must have the knowledge of their own cultural heritage for them to view their heritage, the historical settings, something like that, for them to have the thought of how are they to display or to do the curation jobs. And he ends his lectures with the sort of his research into publications, such as the books of example from Turkmenistan, the example from Azerbaijan or Georgia or Turkey, which are published into bilingual books, something like that. He ends with the sort of motto like this, that collaboration should be encouraged by universities, not just only that the government of any country to support the collaboration of that research, but it should be driven and encouraged first by universities. Okay, and it's this now in the Thai. ก็ถ้าจะสรุปเป็นภาษาไทยนะครับเลคเชอร์ของ Professor Paul Michael Taylor นะครับก็จะเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของการที่จะมองหาเรื่องของทุนวิจัยเนี่ยนะแล้วก็มองหาเรื่องความร่วมมือนะในเรื่องของการวิจัยนะด้วยความที่ว่าประสบการณ์ของท่านนั้นเนี่ยนะก็จะเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของการที่จะจัดการพิพิธภัณฑ์นะโดยเฉพาะจัดการพิพิธภัณฑ์ที่เกี่ยวกับประวัติศาสตร์ธรรมชาตินะแล้วก็เรื่องของมรดกทางวัฒนธรรมนะในแต่ละท้องถิ่นในแบบนั้นนะครับท่านก็พบว่านะครับจากการที่ท่านได้ทำงานในทางด้านพิพิธภัณฑ์นะแล้วก็นำไปสู่การที่ท่านจะได้มีการวิจัยอะไรต่ออะไรด้วยนั้นเนี่ยนะท่านพบเลยว่าเรื่องของความร่วมมือนั้นเนี่ยนะเป็นเรื่องที่ขาดไม่ได้จริงๆนะครับเพราะว่าคงไม่ใช่ว่าเวลาที่ท่านจะมีความสนใจหัวข้อสนใจในเรื่องของมรดกทางวัฒนธรรมในทางอินโดนีเซียบ้างในทางจาวาหรือไทยแลนด์หรือว่าจะมาเลเซียอะไรก็ตามเนี่ยไม่ใช่แค่ว่าทางสถาบันของท่านหรือสถานวิจัยของท่านจะโชว์ความสนใจแค่นั้นแล้วก็สามารถจะมาวิจัยได้เลยนะครับเพราะว่าคงจำเป็นอย่างยิ่งเลยที่จะต้องมีฐานรองรับเอาไว้นะซึ่งหน่วยงานวิจัยนะที่ท่านจะได้มาติดต่อด้วยและหน่วยงานวิจัยนั้นโดยมากแล้วเนี่ยนะก็มักจะต้องเป็นหน่วยงานวิจัยที่อยู่ในทางระดับมหาวิทยาลัยหรือในสถาบันวัฒนธรรมที่เกี่ยวข้องนะฮะโดยที่ว่ามีทุนสนับสนุนไว้อยู่แล้วนะแล้วก็การที่จะร่วมมือในการที่จะคิดค้นหัวข้อในงานวิจัยอะไรต่ออะไรนั้นเนี่ยนะก็มีความจำเป็นอย่างยิ่งเลยที่จะต้องถูกผลักดันนะฮะโดยหน่วยงานวิจัยเหล่านั้นนะซึ่งมักจะเป็นในทางมหาวิทยาลัยนี้ก่อนนะมากกว่าที่ว่าจะสามารถติดต่อรัฐบาลแล้วก็จะได้รับความร่วมมือในการวิจัยอะไรต่ออะไรได้นะครับท่านพบว่านะฮะมีมรดกทางวัฒนธรรมเยอะแยะมากมายนะครับที่อยู่ในสิ่งที่ท่านมาวิจัยอย่างในแถบทางอินโดนีเซียนะในทางซาบาบอร์เนียวอะไรเงี้ยนะของมาเลเซียบ้างเนี่ยนะพบว่ามีเครื่องไม้เครื่องมือในทางวัฒนธรรมนะฮะหรือว่าเรื่องของศิลปะวัฒนธรรมอะไรเยอะแยะมากมายนะครับที่เป็นลักษณะของ precious antiques เนี่ยก็คือเป็นของเก่าโบราณที่มีความล้ำค่านะควรค่าอย่างยิ่งที่จะได้ดูในเรื่องของอดีตวัฒนธรรมในพวกนี้นะที่เกี่ยวข้องกับมรดกทางวัฒนธรรมเหล่านั้นนะครับนะเช่นถ้าอย่างในที่ไหนสักที่จะรู้สึกในแถบนี้แหละหรือไม่ก็ที่เจแปนนี่แหละนะที่พบว่าอย่างมีเรื่องของตะกร้าอะไรแบบนี้นะที่จักสานจากต้นไม้อะไรทำนองนี้นะฮะ หรือว่าเครื่องไม้เครื่องมือในทางเกษตรกรรมอะไรแบบนั้นนะครับที่ท่านพบแล้วค่อนข้างจะมีความน่าสนใจนะซึ่งทำสะท้อนให้เห็นนะซึ่งวิถีชีวิตนะของชาวนานะตั้งแต่สมัยโบราณอะไรต่ออะไรเนี่ยแม้กระทั่งว่าภาพถ่ายนะที่ถ่ายตั้งแต่100 200 300 ปีที่ผ่านมาอะไรอย่างนั้นนะแล้วก็มีความน่าสนใจที่ว่าสามารถที่จะแสดงให้เห็นถึงภาพชีวิตของชาวนาบ้างนะของผู้ที่อยู่ในท้องถิ่นนั้นๆนะว่ามีวิถีชีวิตอะไรอย่างไรแบบนี้นะครับนะแล้วยิ่งเป็นตัวตอกย้ำเลยว่าทำไมจึงต้องมีเรื่องของการร่วมมือนะในการวิจัยสิ่งเหล่านี้เนี่ยนั่นเป็นเพราะว่านะในทางพิพิธภัณฑ์นะที่สถาบัน Smithsonian นะได้จัดการอะไรต่ออะไรอยู่เนี่ยนะก็มีคำขวัญนะของทางสถาบันนี้เองเนี่ยนะว่าควรที่จะได้ตอบรับนะที่จะเพิ่มแล้วก็กระจายเรื่องของความรู้แบบนี้เนี่ยนะในเรื่องของการจัดการทางวัฒนธรรมแบบนี้นะแต่ครั้นว่าถ้าจะกระจายความรู้จากในทางโลกตะวันตกเนี่ยนะแล้วก็เหมือนมาครอบงำโลกตะวันออกไปเลยนะเนี่ยมันก็ดูเหมือนกับว่าจะดูเหมือนยังไม่ตอบรับกับวิธีคิดทางวัฒนธรรมที่อาจจะเป็นเฉพาะแหล่งเฉพาะที่นั้นท่านก็เลยสนับสนุนโปรแกรมแบบที่ว่ามีการที่จะให้ผู้ดูแลพิพิธภัณฑ์นะที่ทำงานทางด้านcuration ในพวกนี้เนี่ยนะครับก็น่าจะได้มีวิธีการที่จะมองเห็นนะฮะซึ่งความรู้ในทางวัฒนธรรมที่เป็นในหนทางของตนเองนะแล้วก็ให้ตอบรับกับสิ่งที่เรียกว่า post colonial knowledge นะคือการจัดการความรู้ประเภทที่ควรจะอยู่ภายหลังอิทธิพลของอาณานิคมได้แล้วทำนองนั้นนะครับงั้นก็มันก็เลยจำเป็นอยู่เองนะที่ว่านะผู้ดูแลพิพิธภัณฑ์หรือว่าการจัดการพิพิธภัณฑ์นั้นเนี่ยนะควรที่จะนะเดินตามวิธีคิดนะที่ควรจะเป็นในแต่ละแหล่งวิถีชุมชนหรือว่าในแต่ละท้องถิ่นนะครับซึ่งก็จะเป็นความน่าสนใจมากกว่าที่ว่าจะรับอิทธิพลอาณานิคมแล้วก็จัดการพิพิธภัณฑ์ในรูปแบบที่ประเทศตะวันตกนั้นเนี่ยนะทำเอาไว้เลยทำนองนั้นนะฮะก็มีการค้นพบว่าความที่จะร่วมมือในทางการวิจัยเนี่ยก็สามารถเป็นไปได้หลากหลายทางนะครับเช่นการที่จะเข้าไปค้นคว้านะจากสิ่งที่เคยเป็นงานตีพิมพ์เอาไว้นะตั้งแต่ในโบราณในทำนองนั้นนะแล้วก็เขาก็ทำมาเหมือนเป็นวอลลุ่มนะของหนังสือนะที่ทำมาหลายวอลลุ่มแล้วอะไรเงี้ยนะครับก็หนังสือเหล่านั้นเนี่ยนะที่เก็บข้อมูลเอาไว้นะหรือเก็บผลงานวิจัยเอาไว้เนี่ยก็มีความน่าสนใจที่จะไปวิจัยออกมาอีกทีหนึ่งนะครับว่าหลายร้อยปีก่อนเลยนะที่ทำงานวิจัยเหล่านี้มามีวิธีมุมมองอะไรอย่างไรในเรื่องของการพัฒนาเรื่องการมองเรื่องมรดกทางวัฒนธรรมในแบบนี้นะครับนะแล้วก็ท่านก็ช่วยเห็นในตอนท้ายนะฮะว่าท่านก็ได้ทำ collaboration ในทาง research แบบนี้เนี่ยนะแล้วก็ทำจากหลากหลายที่หลากหลายประเทศนะที่ท่านยกตัวอย่างก็เช่นจากว่าทำในเทิร์กเมนิสถานนะแล้วก็อาเซอร์ไบจานจอร์เจียแล้วก็ตุรกีนะครับท่านก็เน้นย้ำอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะครับว่าความร่วมมือพวกนี้เนี่ยนะควรที่จะต้องผลักดันนะครับโดยขึ้นจากสถาบันมหาวิทยาลัยเนี่ยก่อนนะครับเพราะว่าเป็นแหล่งของความรู้นะที่ล้ำค่าทีเดียวนะที่จะสามารถปลูกเรื่องของความรู้ในทางการวิจัยเนี่ยเอาไว้ด้วยกันได้นะครับมากกว่าที่ว่าจะคาดหวังว่าจะต้องได้รับการสนับสนุนจากรัฐบาลเพียงอย่างเดียวนะครับครับขอบคุณครับ Thank you very much Professor Okay and this is now maybe we have some time left for us to the start of our question and answer session, sort of maybe 5 to 10 minutes. นะครับก็คงขอเรียนผู้เข้าร่วมนะครับว่าถ้ามีคำถามที่จะถามกับprofessor ทั้ง3ท่านนะครับก็นะลองตั้งคำถามมาได้โดยหน้าที่จะเปิดไมค์ที่จะตั้งคำถามได้เลยนะครับถ้าถามเป็นภาษาอังกฤษเลยก็แล้วแต่นะแต่ถ้าเป็นภาษาไทยก็ได้ครับเดี๋ยวจะได้ translate ให้อีกทีหนึ่งก่อนครับท่านรองคณบดีครับตอนนี้เรามีเวลาเหลือประมาณเท่าไหร่ครับที่จะทำ Q&A session ไหมครับ
ยังมีเวลาเหลืออยู่ประมาณสัก5 นาทีครับอาจารย์ยังมีเวลาอยู่ครับก็ใครมีความสงสัยหรืออยากจะถามท่านวิทยากรนะครับก็สามารถที่จะถามได้นะครับ
ถ้าตั้งคำถามเปิดไมค์ถามเลยก็ได้ครับ
มีคำถามจากผู้เข้าชมไหมครับผู้เข้าฟังไหมครับ น่าจะไม่มีครับท่านงานเทพทวีครับผม
ครับโอเคครับงั้นเดี๋ยวผมก็คงกล่าวปิดใช่ไหมครับหรือนะกล่าวประกอบ
ครับผมตอนนี้Professor Kok On อยู่ไหมครับผม Hello Professor Kok On and Professor Ramzah
Yes, Prof Kowit.
Okay Professor so now
I'm still here.
Yes, we are here.
Okay sir so Champ please ปักหมุดในแชมป์นะครับเพื่อที่จะให้ท่านวิทยากรอยู่ด้วยกันนะครับแล้วก็เดี๋ยวเราจะได้ถ่ายภาพนะครับโอเค so now the international webinar is now over so I would like to express my sincere thanks to you all very much and without your help this international webinar could not have been accomplished so I would like to let the moderator นะอาจารย์ดร. Theptawee นะครับ please say about this one in the last function please
okay thank you
sorry, may I?
Yes sir.
May I add? I appreciate also I want to express my thanks to everyone for participating. I am putting now in the chat my academia public page address. If anybody wants any of the publications which I mentioned, you can download them for free, no charge, from this page, the academia. And I also include Instagram and Facebook. So please feel free to stay in contact. Or if anyone has any extra questions, please feel free to contact me. And thank you all again.
Yes, sir. And one thing important, I would like to express my sorry to Dr. Ramzah because I misunderstand. I think you have only one PowerPoint, including Dr. Kok On. So that's why I only download one PowerPoint and display for you. Okay. Sorry for that.
It's okay. I think
I misunderstand. I think you talk together with the same PowerPoint.
No, that is fine. I think that is just a small misunderstanding and technical glitches.
That is technical problem.
Yeah.
So I do hope for the further research. We will bring the matter of fact as you told, as you have lecture today to make the collaboration in the future. Especially for UMS also very important university in Borneo Island and also Smithsonian. We also have the very we will keep in touch with Dr. Paul because 2 years ago, Dr. Paul, I have gone to Smithsonian and talk about the academic collaboration, something like this. So we do hope in the future we can make the collaboration in each other for sure. Okay. Thank you so much. And okay, please, อาจารย์ดร. Theptawee ครับเชิญครับ
Okay. And we are to express our apologies for any inconveniences. However, maybe it is rather natural for the sort of Zoom meeting like this. Sort of inconveniences could be occurred. Okay, on the behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, we would like to show our gratitude to all of the 3 professors to give us lecture this evening from Professor Dr. Kok On, from Associate Professor Dr. Ramzah Dambul and Dr. Paul Michael Taylor. All of your presentations were beyond excellent, and we would like to thank you very much. Thank you for taking your time to prepare such wonderful presentations, and we were grateful to you for the amazing lecture you gave us. Your lectures are incredibly formative and interesting. Thank you very much.
We hope your university pay us a visit one day to have collaboration. I think Prof. Kowit now. And we are nice to meet Dr. Paul Michael Taylor. When you come to Kota Kinabalu, do contact us. You
Oh,
get our
likewise.
contact.
Yeah, when you get to Washington, we look forward to your
Yeah.
visit very much.
I hope Dr. Ramzah and I will pay a visit to your museum.
I think I actually find that Dr. Paul, the research is very interesting. I really think that Prof. Low, you should collaborate with Dr. Paul. Your team from Arts Academy.
Yes. I keep in touch with Prof. Kowit. So
yeah, please do. And I'm so interested in the folklores. Your work with Kadasandusun.
Right. So hopefully you pay a visit to Sabah, contact us. You have Prof. Kowit contact, email or what, we welcome you. We will take you around.
Okay. So we have the dean now here in this room. So I would like to invite the dean to leave some message, a little bit talking to the speakers, please.
Well, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, Kasetsart University, I would like to thank all of you, the three professors, and it's been very fruitful, and we're very glad and grateful that you that share all the ideas, and there's a possibility that we can have collaboration in the future. Thank you.
Okay. So now the international webinar is over. Last but not the least, I would like to express my sincere thanks again to all of you. Okay, I do hope we see you all in the future. Okay, thank you and see you next. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you all again.
Okay, so see you again.
Good night. Good night. Good morning to Dr. Paul, maybe.
Yes.
Now Malaysia is 9 p.m. Bangkok.
Yes.
Bangkok.
See you again. After the unfolding of the COVID-19.
Yeah. Pray that the pandemic leave us as soon as possible.
Okay, sir. Bye-bye.
Okay, sure we'll meet each other. Okay, good night.
Good night. Good night.
And good morning.
And good morning again to Dr. Paul in Smithsonian. โอเคขอบคุณทุกคนนะครับวันนี้ที่เข้ามาร่วมฟังนะครับก็เรียบร้อยดีนะครับก็รบกวนประเมินให้หน่อยนะครับในส่วนที่เป็นแบบประเมินนะครับก็จะมีคิวโค้ดให้นะครับประเมินให้หน่อยนะครับสำหรับโครงการนะครับก็หนูพนิตายังอยู่ใช่ไหมครับโอเคนะฮะก็รบกวนประเมินให้หน่อยนะครับก่อนที่จะลิฟต์จากห้องนะครับขอบคุณมากนะครับ
ขอบคุณทุกท่านนะคะ
ครับขอบคุณท่านคณบดีเป็นอย่างสูงครับขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะ
ขอบคุณครับขอบคุณท่านคณบดีและรองคณบดีครับ
ขอบคุณท่านอาจารย์เทพทวีเป็นอย่างสูงครับดำเนินรายการได้ยอดเยี่ยมเลยนะครับ
ขอบคุณอาจารย์เทพทวีค่ะอาจารย์มนตรีด้วยค่ะ
อาจารย์มนตรีด้วยนะครับ
เป็นเล่ม